Please welcome and present the Lama's message. Tashidelek and good morning. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodian of this land on which we are meeting today, the Gadigal people of our nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Today, at the inaugural conference of Tibetan Buddhist centers in Australia, first of all, I would like to pay my deep homage to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and pray for His Holiness' continued well-being and long life for the benefit of sentient beings for eons to come. On behalf of Tibet Information Office, I would like to extend my hearty welcome to our chief guest, Gavin Powell Davis, Chair of Federation of Australian Buddhist Councils and Buddhist Council of NSW, our special guest, Geshe Losang Doga, Resident Lama of Tara Institute, and Madam Khyentse Dongdu, former member of Tibetan Parliament in Exile, invited panel members, representative and resident lamas, resident teachers from Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist centers and leaders of Tibetan communities. This conference is an initiative taken by Tibet Information Office based in Canberra. It is the first of its kind in Australia. The objective of this conference is to bring together Tibetan Buddhist centers, teachers, practitioners in Australia to discuss the teaching of Tibetan Buddhism and His Holiness Dalai Lama and their significance to the contemporary world. As you all know, the world is suffering from uncertainty caused by the global pandemic and conflict everywhere. Therefore, I feel it is very important to understand and create a greater awareness of four principal commitments of His Holiness Dalai Lama for the well-being of all sentient beings. I believe that these commitments of His Holiness Dalai Lama are more relevant now than ever in today's troubled world. His first commitment is the promotion of human values such as compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, and self-discipline. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is committed to promoting essential values that will make us happier and foster a sense of shared humanity. Secondly, he is committed to promoting religious harmony, respect, and understanding among different creeds. His Holiness wants people to acknowledge that despite differences, all religions share one purpose to create better human beings and a more peaceful and compassionate world. Thirdly, His Holiness is a Tibetan, and as the Dalai Lama, he is the focus of Tibetan people's hope and trust. Therefore, he is committed to preserving Tibetan language and culture, the heritage that Tibetans received from the Master of India's Nalanda University, and also the protection of Tibet's natural environment. In addition, His Holiness has lately spoken of his commitments to reviving awareness of the value of ancient Indian knowledge. His Holiness believed that the rich ancient Indian understanding of the working of the minds and emotion, as well as the technique of mental training, such as meditation, are of great relevance today. I hope after this conference, we will have a better understanding and recognition of this commitment for the benefit of individual, society, and the world at large. I hope the conference will reaffirm a commitment to engage and cooperate with communities of other faiths with respect and harmony to promote shared values. I believe that all Buddhist practitioners have a moral responsibility to support the cause of Tibet. After all, it affects the very survival of Tibetan Buddhism. This ancient religion's future in Tibet is at risk. The Chinese authorities in Tibet are gearing up to increase their control over the Tibetan Buddhism by interfering in Tibetan Buddhist tradition of reincarnation, control monastery, and restrict the academic learning and free movement of monks and nuns. You will hear about this and the current dire state of religious freedom in Tibet and China in the second session of this conference. This conference also provides an opportunity and platform to all participants to exchange experience and ideas on how to preserve and promote the essence of Tibetan Buddhism in this period of global change and uncertainty, and to explore ways to strengthen our Dharma community. Your suggestion in this regard will be highly valued, and I encourage participants to collaborate and share their ideas. Finally, Australian Buddhists have great respect for His Holiness and his teachings, and the wider Australian community respect him as a global leader of peace, compassion, and non-violence. If we can practice His Holiness' teaching in our daily lives, I believe it will help support not only our inner peace and the happiness of those around us, but also overcome some of the challenges and conflict that the world currently faces. We are overwhelmed and greatly encouraged by the response received to our invitation. We have here nearly 100 participants from various Buddhist centers and Tibetan communities across Australia. Your participation in this inaugural function is already a significant testament to the importance of the teachings Tibetan Buddhism and His Holiness Dalai Lama in today's world. Once again, I sincerely welcome you all. Thank you. It is a great honor to read out His Holiness message on today's conference. The message from His Holiness Dalai Lama. I'm happy to know that a one-day conference of Tibetan Buddhist centers, teachers, and practitioners is to be held in Sydney on 26 March 2023. Over the years, Tibetan Buddhist teachers have been teaching about the Buddhism at the invitation of interested students in many parts of the world, including Australia. This conference provides a valuable opportunity to learn and share from each other's experience. Of course, in addition to Tibetan Buddhist Center, there are communities in Australia from historical Buddhist countries such as China, Vietnam, and Thailand. During my visit in Australia over the year, I have met many of them. Since we are all followers of the same teachers, the Buddha, it's important to maintain good relations with them as well. Although the Buddha lived and taught in India 2,500 years ago, we remember, respect, and reverence him still for the teaching he gave based on the principle of non-violence, ahimsa, and compassion and karuna. These are the principles that rely on tremendous inner strength, patience, and courage. In an increasing independent world, our own welfare and happiness depend on many other people. All of us have a right to peace and happiness. Therefore, we have a responsibility to help those in need on the basis of oneness of humanity. All major religions convey the same message of love, compassion. In addition, Buddhism uniquely propounds the concept of interdependence and accords closely with fundamental notion of modern science. Indeed, we can think of Buddhism in terms of three main categories: philosophy, science, and religion. The religious aspect is a concern to Buddhists alone, but the Buddhist philosophy of interdependence as well as Buddhist science of mind and human emotion have so much potential to contribute towards developing a peaceful world. We need to be 21st century, we need to be 21st century Buddhists engaging in the study and analysis of Buddha's teaching and not rely on faith alone. Although Tibet, the land of snow, has undergone tremendous difficulties in the recent times, one of the positive consequences has been that people have become aware of Tibetan Buddhist culture with its emphasis on compassion and warm-heartedness, and is part of the treasure of humanity. We must therefore make earnest endeavors to create a genuinely peaceful world free of weapons and violent conflicts. With my prayers and good wishes for the success of this conference, Dalai Lama. Thank you so much.
다른 당근들은 명이 계좌치 가셔서만 나기 계좌 제일만 나요 말이야. 나요 말이야. 그때 계좌 가지셔야 야부야 해서 이제는 당만도 대제까지 들어요. 산에 대제까지 샹게로 가서 산에 대제 가르치는 아주 육 되는 게 대대로 육 된다도 가르는 맞아 그 이유가 72대대 다만은 만년만 공부해도 정말도 배우고 랭게 돼. 대가 다 뭐지 사람한테 배워 가와도 육 가서 찍어요. 일단 가서 나래 맞아 가서 대 갑자기 내가 저거 대제까지 맞아 내가 마찬가지로 가져고요. 장애로 뒤니고요. 다 만도 가져냐는 게 너무 너무세라면 시좀 잘라서 완전 장애는 뭐지로 봐. 코트에 좌세 집어 뒤니고요. 코트에 많이 좌세 집어더니 반트 문제만 로고야. 코트에 마셔는 소소 내가 디바정 생은 소파는 어때? 대 관계가 들려가지고 그런 게를 다 장애를 넘어져 먼저 대해서 시는 예수시고 말다. 대살 자식 강 살 자식 맞대 저거야. 예때 제가 연계해서 말 로이서 말 로이서 따발려. 계시로서 차도 민시자데 계시로서 차송한 날려 말에 계시세 들어가서만 유가빙을 내면 연세 뒤뒤 봤더니 그러나 되는 로이서 연계해서 나 먼저 대통령이 된지 그래서 다시지를 제세 줬어. 나 기부를 제세 줬어. 얘기 봐. 다들 기바세는 제가 저거 세고 나 7,000바트 가지고 때바 공부해 보고 좀바트 때바 이런 뉴스야. 제 되게 때바 심해져. 일단 기백이 샤다 다 가지 제주도에서 기발이야 제주도에서 말이야 말이야 계시 로조선 로조도 세가래 이날 다 지대쇼를 계시에 그만시야 말이다 이제 까지 미시 저거를 일단 다 맞아 가르 세고 하선 다 저저 먼저 가르 거고 하선 먼저 장견을 까지 저거라 아도 다 배가 가리라 만도 놀지 요하라 말이지 마데 샤레 지와 가반노라 나 사제시 번노라 사시보자 만도 생들 마데하지 요하라 이 마데하도 가르 놓는 마가 만도 롬에 바티 빠는 거 마데서 사자 가버셔 서도 사자 말와 사시보자 소 사자 말와 내가 만든 손도 오거든요. 대체 손을 제 돌아 서도 롱고 그때 지금 유까지 저기 손을 대매나 서도 롱고 같아 저 소버시버 주는데 네 소를 왜요 말이야. 나 먼저 배배가 되는 리리닝이 거시 손버 대마라봐 맞아 그걸 알아. 대마라봐 그 알아. 완전 지
excluding India, Nepal, and Bhutan. So with that, I would now request that Kinjal Basu say a few words.
Thank you, Sunamla. Tashtele, everyone, and thank you for bringing your positive intentions, energy, and knowledge to the first conference of Tibetan Buddhist practitioners in Australia. It is a great privilege to be here and sharing some thoughts. We are here, of course, because all of our lives have been touched by the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and we recognize that these teachings are important to humanity now more than ever. In fact, some of you may not be Tibetan or Buddhist, but we don't really have to be Tibetan or Buddhist to recognize Tibetan Buddhism's unique contribution to the world. In particular, His Holiness Dalai Lama's teachings about living in harmony with one another is a blueprint for how we deal with the great challenges of today, environmental, moral, or political. But as Tibetans, we also know firsthand how these teachings and the culture that gave birth to these teachings are under immense threat from the forces that see these teachings as an existential challenge to their grip on power. And here, of course, I'm referring to the Communist Chinese government. We live in a free country, but the country from where Tibetan Buddhism came from is today ranked the least free country in the world. Today we are able to look at this big, beautiful photo of His Holiness Dalai Lama, but keeping a portrait of the Dalai Lama, a global icon of peace, is a criminal act in Tibet, and you'll be imprisoned for openly displaying a photo like this. So I want all of us.
Thank you very much for welcoming me to this very important meeting. Sometimes I go to a meeting to welcome people, but I figure we're all Buddhists, we're all Australians, we're all concerned about Tibet, so we're all equal. And it's good to be amongst friends. I was asked to speak about the Australian Buddhists' reverence for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I can, but it seems to me this is both too small and too big. It's too big because one of the things I know about the Dalai Lama is from people I know who have met him. It's always the same experience. You're in a room for a lot of people. And the moment you meet him, you know you are the only person in the room. And the experience of being the only person in the room of a man of such wisdom and compassion changes people. And my wife, who dropped me here this morning, she doesn't call herself a Buddhist, but years ago she attended the Kali Chakra that His Holiness commemorated. And the thing that she remembers is at the end of 3 days, everyone was given a bowl of rice and they ate together. And to me, that is what Buddhism is about.
The Eora Nation, I want to pay my respects to those First Nations peoples. I'm reporting this in Canberra, I'm not in all country. I usually live in Melbourne, on Wurundjeri country. No matter where we are in Australia, I want to acknowledge, send my respects to the elders, past and present, of all of our First Nations peoples, and to commit ourselves to be working for justice, working for treaties with our First Nations peoples, and working for people to have justice in their own land, which I know you as Tibetans is something that you feel very strongly about. It's a very important topic that you are discussing today, protecting religious freedom and the issue of the Dalai Lama's succession. I would particularly want to acknowledge Mr. Karma Singh, the representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Australia, and thank you, Karma, for your support, and it's been terrific working with you in the time that you've been in that role. And I want to thank you as Tibetan people and acknowledge your resilience and your determination, in the words of His Holiness, to never give up, and for your commitment to non-violent struggle for the rights of the Tibetan people. It's an inspiration to us all. It's sobering to think that it's now 68 years of control of Tibet by the People's Republic of China, and 64 years since the 10th of March 1959, when the Dalai Lama had to flee Tibet. Yet, over these almost 7 decades, the struggle for religious freedom, self-determination, freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and the freedom to practice Tibetan culture and language has never waned. And the leadership of His Holiness has been immense in this. So I can imagine for you as Tibetan Buddhists,
it is a great pleasure and a privilege to be part of this Tibetan Buddhist Center's conference in Australia. Despite my inability to attend the conference due to my parliamentary roles and the ongoing Tibetan Parliament session in India, I was provided this opportunity of connecting to you through this video message. I'm certain that this conference will have a great impact on the Tibetans, Australians, and others living in Australia as well as around the world.
Many greetings to all the participants of the Tibetan Buddhist centers and associations based in Australia, being held at the Sydney UTS University. We are very thankful to the organizers for organizing this conference and creating a platform for all Buddhist followers, irrespective of the lineage, the particular lineage that you follow. And at this meeting, one of the main topic for discussion are the 4 commitments of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So as a human being, one amongst the 8 billion
Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to speak in Tibetan because I know the majority of the audience here is Tibetans, and much of the presentation will be in English, so I might as well moderate in Tibetan to do justice and respect to our language. Davide kutsab tunju de kodinang de pujunang de sobeke shozo tsame et son de mixage de kodinang je maranzo de zomye chune enyam bonzom che tatrin de yere kundu ge lana me tuke tamja mambo yore manzo che jamna che noye yo mare ine de tuzo tungdong na la pienamba la konamba la kewan shurwa des kon lo java nyamyon chamba de ti de koran so ge kundu ge tuke ge tamja kare yo ti de sumera ge koka yore su nangere ti ningbo inji ge sumere de ne du chu chobachi tuji na manzo yawa shinu. Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you everybody. Tashi de. Tene ta kichamombo ngala kichamombo. She goya shiramudu te ta she shiramu shiramu she kai ga ne. Ne kecha karshe gore sende korosu butara ngala te order te ando butara. Karshe gore sende ane ro mala chi deshi yota sa ate chi deshi ro ma ta mando chi namba mai bala so ba chi chenge chi ki no tera mai ba chilu do tera kecha mudia ro mala chi deshi de ta kar gure sa ando chi ti ko la kecha shi gure sa chi do tenji is ane ta ro mala chi deshi sa ate ro ma chama dewa de duma mande pichanga rewa deza deshira dewa lo moga ke sekayo mare
Tashdale everyone, it's an absolute joy to be with you today here. It seems that we have enough time for the very beginning and the very end. So anybody else who would like the whole talk today, I would encourage you to contact Kamala and he will have a copy to email to you. I'd like to take the key points from His Holiness and his commitments and values and offer a hopeful approach through universal ethics and reframing human values. But in order to make sense of this, we need to look for a very brief moment at the extreme end of this troubled world to remind ourselves why action is urgently needed. Our complex world is inhabited by 8 billion humans, and a powerful image of contemporary trouble is that doomsday clock. Created and monitored by scientists in 1947, it's now set perilously close to the extinction mark of midnight, urging us to take action that delivers a more hopeful future for all of humanity. What does the clock mean? Have any of you seen it? The doomsday clock is a symbolic timepiece, and it shows how close the world is to ending. Midnight marks the theoretical point of annihilation. Apocalyptic threats could arise from political tensions, weapons, technology, climate change, or pandemic illness.
Thank you very much. It's an honour for me to be here today, and I also bring the greetings of Lama Zopa Rinpoche to this meeting with the wish that the whole proceedings go extremely smoothly. I'd like to begin today with acknowledgements, acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. And I'd also like to acknowledge this unique gathering of Geshis, monks, nuns, teachers, students, administrators from Australia's Tibetan Buddhist community. And I'd like to also congratulate His Holiness's representative Karma Singh and his team for the initiative that they have shown in establishing this important event. May it be the first of many such events in Australia. Most of the Buddhist world know the vital role that Tibet has played in preserving and protecting the teachings of the Buddha. But what is perhaps not as well known is the role that, almost contradictory role, contribution that Tibetan Buddhism has made in innovating and updating Buddhism, and especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So when we look at the introduction of Buddhism into the West, we see that Tibetan Lamas developed a new style of teaching the Dharma, while the vast majority of Tibetan Buddhist traditions entering the West remained focused on their passing on the teachings, their culture and their language.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be quite short. So I wish to thank Karma Singila for inviting me to speak on this topic. So the topic that I'm talking on is the contribution of His Holiness to the dialogue between Buddhist science and modern science. So it's a huge topic. And of course we're aware that His Holiness is talking about science all the time. It's a dominant factor of our lives. We keep on bumping into it, the internet, phones, etc. In fact, His Holiness has taken a keen interest in science and technology from a young age. We're aware of this. Later, after the Tibetan uprising in '59, he came to India, went to India and settled in Dharamsala, along with many Tibetan refugees. And in the following decades, His Holiness has pursued his interest in science, gaining instruction on various topics from eminent scientists. So this is a wonderful deed that His Holiness has undertaken to really find out what's happening in the world and to understand it and to be able to converse on these topics. His Holiness has pursued his interest in science, gaining instruction on various topics. His dialogues with scientists have left a valuable record of clarifying insights into modern scientific principles. So even for we Westerners to read what His Holiness has to say about science is informative, very. 다들 프레게도 해주시나? 다 센릭 렌니어레스. 수기 센릭 생기 센릭. 다 치기하기 센릭이 수기 센릭레스. 애니 남비처 디 생기 센릭레스. 생기 센릭이 가레스가 난기네서 따기요. 다디 치기하기 센릭이 die chigi netole tage geres. Sonsan denila kepa garodu. La kepa tina.
We all know the Buddha speak only in simple language. I will try my best to follow that teaching. Even better with these slides to help me understood by you. Okay. Because I'm a historian and political scientist, know little about Buddhism, I actually will focus on Chinese politics. That's my expertise. I will talk about the topic is very big as you will see. The CCP, the religious freedom, and Tibetan Buddhism. But my focus is talk about the CCP regime in China. It's a very short period of time. I don't think I have time to elaborate, but I just go through very briefly about the 7 decades of communist rule in China and why religious freedom could not be pursued or safeguarded in China. Not only the Tibetans, but also Chinese and other ethnic group, simply because this totalitarian regime is not compatible with religious freedom. But the Chinese totalitarian rule in China has gone through
Thank you, Kong. And first of all, I want to say we cannot understate, actually, I should say, the importance of having someone like Dr. Fang Chongyi with us, a scholar of Chinese politics and history, a regime critic, someone who was imprisoned in China when he visited his home country to interview and work with Chinese human rights defenders. So often in the media, we hear a lot about the Chinese Communist Party, but we hardly hear the stories of these brave and courageous Chinese individuals. And I really want to applaud the work that you have done. And it means a lot to us, Tibetans, to have someone like Dr. Fang always with us, whether in a conference like this or on the streets on 10th March Uprising Day. So, in the interest of time, I will make it quite brief, but I do want to say this, that as this topic of religious freedom, it's really at the heart of the crisis that has plagued Tibet since the invasion of Tibet by the Chinese Communist government in 1950. And this is an issue that has become all the more urgent over the past decade under Xi Jinping's dictatorship. I refuse to say Xi Jinping's leadership. He is not providing leadership. It's a dictatorship that he has got in China. And I really value how Dr. Fang really provided that rich historical context and the tension that you see between the Chinese Communist Party and indeed with all religions, and how all these different religions, which are independent of the CCP, are seen as an existential threat. So I want to stress that any religion, and especially Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet, and our rights to exist as Tibetan Buddhism, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. We really need to understand in this broader political and historical context, and this is what Dr. Fang has done, and I really appreciate that. So, all of you being students and followers of the Dharma,
of Tibetan people to their religious leaders. When Chinese forces invaded Tibet in 1949, it was clear to the Chinese Communist Party that Tibetan Buddhism was a great threat to their ability to control Tibetan people. Famously, when Mao Zedong met Dalai Lama in 1950, the Communist Party leader told the Dalai Lama that religion is poison. However, the CCP have failed to capture the hearts and minds of Tibetans. Chinese authorities would like Tibetans to see themselves as Chinese people first, with state-sanctioned Tibetan traditions such as folk songs or traditional dress. This is not now and has never been how Tibetans view themselves. They are steadfastly Tibetan first and maintain their identity as occupied people, loyal to Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama before any Chinese officials, despite the constant attack on the CCP to the Dalai Lama over the 7 decades of occupation. Since the Dalai Lama fled into exile, the CCP has banned his image. Carrying or possessing a photo brings with it harsh penalties, including imprisonment, and the enforcement of the photo ban continues with increased zeal even to today. We receive constant reports of monks and nuns and lay people.
sorry, 미행님이나 계신 거 어쩌려고 아니 다 되는 게 나서 건다 성모로 하는 이분들이 다무들 안에 그 던져가 안 되가나 신지 나주 계시 좀만 남아 성모로야 이분들 쉬어요 답조디 지와체나 가서 네 다 단단한 좀 잠링디가나야 용링 다 가서 오지 주자도 쉬어 차고로 하나씩 막도 뒤진데 그러면 뒤에 가서 독답 비치도 안든 독답 쓰나면도 다 된다기 치도 민망고시 내용들이 다가나 시행기다.
So I would like to extend good afternoon to all the eminent masters and the Kempos and Geshes, especially representative of His Holiness for the event organized here. So whether it can be addressed as a question, I would like to just briefly reflect on what's going on currently at global level, what's happening in the world.
We break for lunch. We have 10 minutes, so if there's anyone, please.
I would like to ask a question. I was listening very carefully to all the panels. Thank you for your speech. Wonderful. I'd like to ask to Zoe. I think I may have heard, maybe I have heard it wrongly, but you seem to say that the Chinese Communist Party is atheist. Is that what was your position? That they are atheist? Is that what you were saying? Because that's what I have interpreted.
Hi, thanks for the question. Yeah, I don't think it's my assessment that they're atheist. I think it's their position officially is that they're atheist. So, you know, I mean, I guess something is a question like, why are they so interested in controlling Tibetan Buddhism and the reincarnation process of His Holiness the Dalai Lama? It seems like a strange thing for a government that themselves says that they are atheist will do. So remember, they're not actually interested.
Is moving into a new phase, a much more ethical, thoughtful phase. His Holiness is extremely valued here, as are all of you. What I would like to say or ask Kinzom is, with the advocacy program, we have seen an ex-premier and ex-prime minister throw Tibet under the bus, and even the Uyghurs recently. But the media is calming down, and people in the political parties are a little bit humbler this last election. Would it be in our interest to call for an education day for all politicians? I know that's a radical idea, but sometimes...
여기 최대로 먹어야 가름 시다모 사게 나서 안들이야 저셔야 근데 전화 슝기 뭐저게 벽이 남주부터야 첩시 싸워지 이제 아니 남주 전화제 비교 동부제 비교야서 시에티고스 남주
Everyone, it's just Tibetan tradition. The question is for Professor Chong Yi Feng. Thank you for your speech about sort of preserving religious freedom in Tibet and around that. The Chinese government has come up with a sort of new policy about Sinicization of Tibetan Buddhism. So therefore, sort of having the Tibetan Buddhism sort of, Sinicization. So for that policy, what would be your understanding? How would you define that policy?
That simplification is a big political slogan. It's not only used to deal with Tibetan Buddhism. It's originally used to deal with Christianity. That is a slogan to manipulate modified religious teachings, as well as to intervene in the internal affair of any religions for the government control and government purpose. It's, we don't need to take that thing very seriously in academic sense. It's a political move, political act, try to disturb, to modify.
다리대 칼로리 남배 추격하다 가서도 보면서 최소화하다 나서대 상황님도 좀 tema 담고 제가 뭐 친제 최소화하다 비리투도 관념으로 체제 내가 간데스 제도에 처리 주도에 성격 제도야 돼요. 이 지금도 쉬어지 제대 비리투도에 가르치 도움에 되지체 근데 이와 될이야 계속 최소화하네 아니 그런도 기준님도 다 기준으로 배가 배신시라 이기면 완전 인지로 이도 최소화하네 그런도 기준님도리야 쉐 라블롬이 시야자 마이바 디메인기 두시 가르샤제 만주 쉐리 쇼송겹 시토레스 최소화 그런 부분에야 비리투도리에 경계 간데스 시토레 쉐리 쇼송겹 시토레
이 먼저 인구격이 가면에서 왔을 때인데 순간에 개침부 통도 그랬으나 단대차가 추적하다 먼저 비리투도 바라라 제와디 하장기 띵사고 요마래 네 니가 한다 펜트웨기 내가 치트웨 네 뭐 통고 들어와 띵어서 인구격라 먼저 직주도 남아야
How extensive is the Australian All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet? What's the range across different parties and how high does it go up? Is there are there cabinet ministers or there's sort of secretary ministry or anything like that involved? How influential is it?
Yeah, good question. Well, at the moment, no, there's no ministers involved in it. It's cross-party, so we have members who are from Labor, from Liberal, from the Greens, and also Nationals and Independents, so some of the Teal Independents in particular. But unfortunately, at the last election that happened last year, a lot of sort of the more senior members of the group left, or were not returning in government. And so since that time we've sort of been reforming the parliamentary group. It's a good question because actually it's not recognised as an official group. Some groups have like an official recognition, but this one doesn't. And it's something that Janet Rice, who's one of the co-chairs,
지박가리나 뒤도 마시에 되는데 이나 조조 당미로 가는 게나 가르치려 그래서는 조조 당난 마우발을 상을 붙여 유식 돌 때에 기소송이 게지도 근데 노다 친구지 용어를 제도 가서 당하고 이제는 못 채로 돌 가는 건조고 가서 차지나고 대사에 내가 강 뒤지 마지나 뒤를 좋아지는 말이었다. 다가 말했는데 다디 카드들에서는 먼저 진수 소소 니니라 또 잡아 소소도 계시다가 아마 소소 니니라 가르가르 제금에 돌을 단단히라 소소고 차지.
I was directed to give a speech, and where I recounted the great difficulties we'd overcome to start the centre. We'd raised the money, we'd find the building, we battled with the council, we came through all these problems. And at that time, after that speech, the spiritual director of the FPMT, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, took me aside and said, "You really shouldn't talk about all the problems and difficulties of running a centre. Really, you can make people discouraged. Rather, you should be more, give people reason for hope and encouragement." So I hope to
Diring Chosun Nagan Samala Tasdela Shawatan Nyamdo Deni Narang Kiming La Zatring Tasila Puyo Narangi Samsurchi Shia Doba Johnson Jamashana Samsuk Dada Miram Yandang Dig Deputy Dangri, which is in the Taiwan, Jarchi Pujan to Himju Sopa, Toto Dan Ginichi. 로존이 잠시가 벌써 레가지. 다 레가지 is 차트 무디만. 디 기름 트롯 맞추 그 때문에
studying science and sort of say, well, you know, these questions on karma, you know, there is either there is or there isn't karma, or either there is a potential for Buddhahood or not, or, you know, so you can raise these questions. It could be quite interesting, just one-day talks on these subjects. I think that could be a way to then get a whole untapped resource of people who are, you know, being presented with, you know, challenging, you know, it was very challenging the way Jampa Imam was putting it, like, you know, from His Holiness, like how you can't really defend to not.
The Society of Canberra, where Lama Choda Rinpoche is a spiritual director. As some of you may know, we've been around since 1989 when Rinpoche established the first centre in Canberra. We're now about 21 sister centres across Australia and New Zealand. And I think we're possibly the largest Tibetan Buddhist organisation.
아니 다 마디를 주고 지역로 좀 개면 다 다른 거를 섬주를 주시이라 아니 단다당한 줄 주시기 그래서는 그래도 좋아서는 마음배니 건설적인 양식이 주시기 아니 진짜 손담 말에 섬주 튕겨지 대도 시행한 삼소 네 다양한 중에 아니 다 마음발이야 아니 경험치 양식이 제시하도 건설 배디 처벌소니 사진 소월이라 이번에 다 말해서 아니 대판으로 토요 말해서 것도 그래서 경험치 양식이 가와피다
Taride me shuna samsma tanda chidan di dire tanga tari I'll speak in English later on, but before that I would like to say a few words in Tibetan. Taride tanga zo ninchi gi ringa gi ta tanda ta manzo tunju ligungi gudu shube ta manzo tanda Australia 나는 대시집에 조속하게 총득이 따지 주동 세월에 나간다 탐에게 다리 총득 나는 저 주딩 제바다 그
kudu cheba ta digi ningden ro ta nganzu ta chik ta dang de mo to ne tem che ti yi ene din du zane tanda chik ne di chik se shi chena sam stari chongdu di ta so mi di ene nganzu pugyu nang de gi ta labja chi ta ene kebar du jino konse kyang go chimbo choge gongshi ene ho de so ta chik ka so ra nganzu tensa zambling gi ta tu se nyang cheng gi kapla ta nyanga ta kene kares la ta di to na nganzu to mi chik di sha jin nganzu tu de chebe and to the new de to Bernang ke ta chik chode rawang re and Bernang ke chode rawang ke nyamdula ta na ju bu yang si gi le de di ta jama ki ze de ne kanda ti ju chi che yu yu de zang ne and di ko na ju ku du ji ta ri de ne se ta ne de di da de we ye be and mi da de shu na de ne stru na re and ta man de na ju ta ri chung du di gi 나로 나라스다 다리데 디데스 좀 제진에 나중간에 비긴 나데 쇼소 카데 좀이한테 페이지 디데 흘려지는 아주 굳은 나한테 페이지 땡 당고 인기래서 드리는 저는 디토라 아나운서 단다고도 주주 비긴 나데 쇼소 소소 디엔다 지게 냠뇽 시가 샤 제진에 엔 마음 베지게 되 나조다 디레기토 온전나야 제진어 디데스 지금 그리유도 방식단데 어디에서 심지나 가지고 굳은나 레스티 쉐 가스나야 다기 아주 가시기 상론나라 다리 총도디 지 꾸이 양시 지고지기 쳇 믹스 카르치는 다리 총도디 콘서트하는 우리 빈다 도지기 한디 코노도 스테나 아주 디랑게 쳇도 게 말해서 소디 아주 그규 난데게 딱간다 랍제치다 주노 콘서트 장관 충분 주고 두개 남자 시대에는 댕규기 간다 정불링이 냐란디 가 만주직 걔네 담내가 가리어 스티트레 근데 냠도다 나도 참말을 간다 개요를 되게 나네게 냠내 진이신도 잠에 별난게 간다 추게 최대로 하기 내담에 간리요를 띵아주 시에야 디네가 저거래 에디냠도 딱 보이는 시단 디게사 백기미게 대주먹으로 치고 두선 나도 뒤줄인 지고에는 시에신 슈게 나도 다리데 줄인데 배면서 야부 중소 and someone got to change in Shui.
Pay my respect and regards to the distinguished guests, speakers, and all the participants on behalf of the Australian Tibetan Communities Association. Many of you may know that such a meeting was planned to convene in the past, and I'm sure that would have ease in convening this meeting. So I would like to congratulate and thank Representative Kama Singela and his team for successfully convening the first meeting of Tibetan Buddhist centers and institutions based in Australia. I can see that many Buddhist centers participating this meeting and also members from Tibetan communities. So I hope this meeting gave an opportunity to engage with each other, and particularly those centers or institutions in their respective areas. I would like to urge both Buddhist centers and Tibetan communities to foster better and closer relations amongst each other and also amongst the Buddhist centers. I'm sure it would benefit all the parties in the future. I hope the meeting was beneficial to everyone involved and something to take away from this gathering. May the Dharma flourish and prevail peace and happiness on earth. I pray for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you.
장관도 표백권에 그린 최소기 손주 안속자와 용가 되시대 주의니 안 데이터 처리다 다리기 최소기 아니 속도 도나 아니 문화재 발송 아니 등교운당이 다 마구 쉬지부터 지시하는 쉬에시 테스트고 쉬에시에 대신 통화들이야 아니 간데 포랑 이산에 인지노 공식 경쟁 주부 조기 아니 손도 같게 되게 아니 손이 해봐야 가대 조숨나네 엔투지까지 라메도 제제 수용이 다가난 시기 폴링 조고메기 투비 제네드라이스레 아니 펜데 시고 페버스링 초레 아니 마치 도링 딘지 핀돌라 나버숨네 엔겐진토 아니 숨딘 해봐야 투체나 수용이 Academy and Tundu Tola, Kundu, any Australia, Nandi Tundoki, any Toto Kerenla, and Chebeki, Tundu Tola, and Sunshe Namalaya, and Tuchenas Shane. And Ranashing, Pending, put up Tunji, Kamasingalane, Unji Tamsheta, and Sunduto, Naje Paso, and Landeta, Namalaya, Tuchenas Shane. Karimbi Sungshin Nanki Kyawan Namare, any Dozimba MC Tan, and moderator Chazandaria, and Yin Kavani, Tuchena Shuni. And Tari Delia, and Sundur Piggy, Chazan Lagi, number so Gag Lamdunta, and Nella Kari, Nella Tangma, so Gagan Mutola Pevalia, and Tuchena Shuni. 아니 다들 진호 공식경을 주고 고지 시작하게 될 때마다 두기 시작은 다들 중기들에 왼두시에니 I would like to start my word of thanks with respect to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I extend my utmost gratitude to Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for message on this conference. And I would like to express heartfelt thank you to the Honorable Sigyong Pembasaring and Senator Janet Rice for delivering video message at opening ceremony, and also Chitu Tenzi Pinzo Doring for video message. At the same time, I would like all the speakers for sharing their expert views and guidance, and NC Sonam Penjo and all the moderators for moderating sessions effectively. And also thank Sydney Tibetan Association President Chunsin La, Secretary Mingman Sering La for helping us in arranging this conference. I would like to extend special thanks to Professor Tung Yung Feng for helping us in arranging the conference at UTS, and Ariel UTS team for facilitating us. And I also thank Representative Kamasingila for his opening remarks and overseeing the conference. And special thanks to Chief Guest, given Chair of Federation of Australian Buddhist Council for his keynote address and attending the conference till the end. Finally, I pray for long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and simultaneous fulfillment of his all wishes. Thank you. Have a safe journey. Thank you.